Walking through the Vatican Archives, you are surrounded by rows and rows of shelves, each housing many thousands of items. So, let's take a look at some of them.
Deep inside the Vatican Archives, archivists opened a long sealed drawer, expecting nothing unusual. Instead, they uncovered a linen-wrapped document with an untouched wax seal, older than most known church records. Its contents challenge core beliefs about early Christianity, raising questions the Vatican has avoided for centuries. What truth was hidden, and why now? The Forgotten Chamber. Deep beneath Vatican City sits one of the world's most important collections of historical documents. The Vatican's secret archives hold over 53 miles of shelving filled with papers that cover 12 centuries of church history. A discovery happened in Section 12 of the archives, an area containing old letters and records from the Renaissance period. This section had barely been touched since the 1700s, when earlier archivists made basic lists of what was stored there. The Vatican had assigned a small team to photograph these materials and create digital records as part of a long-term modernization project. Sister Maria Benedetti was the lead archivist working on the project. She noticed something strange about a wooden storage cabinet from the 1500s. When she measured the outside of the cabinet and compared it to the inside space, 6 inches were missing. Something did not add up. She examined the cabinet more closely and found a false back panel. Centuries of dust and the natural bending of old wood had hidden it. The panel had been built to look like part of the cabinet's original back wall. Behind the false panel was a sealed drawer. The seal was made of hardened wax with an unusual symbol pressed into it. The symbol did not match any known Vatican or church markings. The drawer was made from cedar wood, a material people in ancient times valued because it helped preserve things and kept insects away. Unlike the fancy cabinets around it, this drawer had no decorations or labels. Everything about it suggested someone wanted it hidden, not displayed. Vatican rules required immediate reporting of unexpected discoveries. The parchment was moved to the Vatican's conservation laboratory under heavy security. First examinations showed text written in ancient Aramaic with notes in the margins written in Latin. The writing style matched examples from 1st century Judea, the region where Jesus lived. The ink appeared to be iron gall ink, the type used for writing during Roman times. The parchment itself was made from animal skin, prepared using methods that match archaeological samples from the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. The Vatican sent small samples to 3 separate laboratories for carbon dating. The samples were sent without any labels or information about where they came from to prevent the labs from being influenced. The laboratories were in Switzerland, England, and the United States. All 3 came back with the same result. The parchment materials dated between 30 AD and 70 AD. This dating was stunning. It meant the document was created when Jesus' original followers were still alive and when the first Christian communities were just forming. It was as old as or older than the Gospels in the Bible. No Christian text this old had ever been found in Vatican possession before. Most early Christian writings exist only as later copies. The originals were lost long ago. Early translation of the opening lines worried Vatican officials immediately. The writer claimed to be someone who witnessed events in Jesus' life. The text stated clearly that it contained information that contradicted what church leaders were teaching. The writer said this testimony was being hidden to protect it from being destroyed by people who disagreed with what it said. The Vatican quickly assembled a special committee. It included scholars who studied the Bible, experts in ancient languages, church historians, and senior religious leaders. Everyone signed agreements promising complete secrecy before being told about the discovery. The committee had 3 jobs. First, prove whether the document was real. Second, translate all of it. Third, figure out what it meant for church history and Christian beliefs. The hidden drawer itself raised important questions. Who hid the document? When was it hidden? Why was it kept safe instead of destroyed? The Renaissance-era cabinet suggested someone moved the document to this spot sometime after 1450, but where it was kept before that remained unknown. Church records from that time period might contain clues about the hiding, but finding those records would require careful searching. The search would need to be done without alerting other Vatican staff that something important had been discovered. The document was either an incredible look into early Christianity or an old fake. Either way, it was deeply important. Real or not, someone with access to Vatican resources thought this text was important enough to hide for centuries. The contents of one forgotten drawer now had the power to change 2,000 years of Christian understanding. Decoding the ancient words. The Vatican Committee assembled to study the document began work under extraordinary security measures. The team included 5 specialists in ancient Aramaic, 3 biblical scholars, 2 church historians, and a forensic document examiner. All members were required to work in a sealed laboratory within the Vatican. No materials could leave the room. No electronic devices were permitted. Armed Swiss guards stood outside at all times. The document consisted of a single large piece of parchment covered in dense text. The main body was written in ancient Aramaic using a script style that matched first-century examples from the Dead Sea Scrolls region. The margins contained notes in Latin, suggesting someone in the early church had studied and translated portions of the text. The Latin annotations appeared to be from the 4th or 5th century, based on the writing style and vocabulary. Translation work began immediately. Ancient Aramaic is a challenging language because many words have multiple possible meanings depending on context. The team worked line by line, comparing each phrase to known Aramaic texts from the same period. They consulted dictionaries, grammar references, and databases of inscriptions from 1st century Judea. Progress was slow and careful. Every translation choice was debated and documented. Within the first week, patterns emerged that troubled the translators. The document appeared to be a first-hand account written by someone who claimed close knowledge of Jesus and the early Christian movement. The writer described events and teachings that did not appear in the 4 canonical Gospels. Some passages directly contradicted accepted Christian doctrine established at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. The text contains specific details that could be verified historically. The writer mentioned places, dates, and names of Roman officials that matched known historical records. This level of detail suggested either genuine first-hand knowledge or a very sophisticated forgery created by someone with deep historical expertise. The team noted that forgers in later centuries rarely got such details correct because the information was not widely available. One section described theological debates among Jesus's earliest followers. According to the document, there was significant disagreement about the nature of Jesus's divinity and the meaning of his teachings. The writer claimed that certain beliefs now considered essential to Christianity were actually decisions made by later church leaders, not teachings from Jesus himself. These passages suggested early Christianity was far more diverse in its beliefs than official church history acknowledged. The document also described conflicts over leadership and authority in the first Christian communities. The writer named specific individuals who shaped doctrine and practice after Jesus' death. Some of these figures were portrayed negatively, accused of changing teachings for political advantage rather than spiritual truth. The text implied that certain gospels and letters were promoted while others were suppressed based on which version of Christianity gained institutional power. Most concerning to the committee were passages about Jesus' life and mission that differed from the gospel accounts. The document did not deny Jesus' importance or his role as a spiritual teacher. However, it presented his message and purpose in ways that challenged fundamental Christian beliefs about divine incarnation, atonement, and resurrection. The writer seemed to be recording an alternative understanding of who Jesus was and what he taught. As translation continued, the Vatican brought in additional experts to analyze the document's physical properties. Forensic examiners used multispectral imaging to reveal details invisible to the naked eye. They found no evidence of modern materials or techniques. The parchment showed natural aging patterns consistent with extreme age. The ink had penetrated the parchment fibers in ways that cannot be artificially reproduced. Chemical analysis of the ink matched compositions used in first-century writing. Handwriting analysis compared the script to authenticated examples from the same time period. The letter forms, spacing, and scribal habits all matched first-century Aramaic writing conventions. The writer appeared to be an educated person familiar with both Jewish and Greek literary traditions. This was consistent with the profile of early Christian leaders who moved between Jewish and Gentile communities. The Latin margin notes were analyzed separately. These appeared genuine as well, written by someone in the 4th or 5th century who was translating and commenting on the Aramaic text. The presence of these notes indicated the document had been known to at least some church officials in late antiquity. Someone had studied it carefully enough to add detailed annotations. After 3 months of intensive work, the committee completed a full translation. They had verified that the document was physically authentic, dating to the 1st century AD. The content claimed to be eyewitness testimony from someone within the inner circle of early Christianity. Whether that claim was true remained uncertain, but the Vatican now possessed a text as old as any Christian writing ever discovered, and its contents challenged the foundations of Christian belief. The hidden teachings. The text described Jesus presenting ideas about the nature of God and salvation that differed significantly from Orthodox Christian theology. According to this account, Jesus taught that divinity existed within all people, not exclusively within himself. The writer claimed Jesus emphasized direct personal connection with God rather than salvation through institutional religion or belief in specific doctrines. These teachings resembled ideas found in suppressed early Christian texts like the Gospel of Thomas, which the Church had declared heretical centuries ago. The document contained passages about the afterlife and resurrection that conflicted with standard Christian understanding. The writer described Jesus teaching about spiritual transformation rather than physical resurrection. According to this account, Jesus spoke of awakening to divine truth during life, not about bodies rising from graves after death. The text suggested that later church leaders transformed these metaphorical teachings into literal beliefs about physical resurrection to make Christianity more appealing to Greek and Roman converts, familiar with dying and rising God myths. One section dealt directly with the nature of Jesus himself. The writer portrayed Jesus as an extraordinary spiritual teacher and prophet, not as God incarnate. The text described Jesus as fully human, chosen by God for a special mission but not divine in substance. This view aligned with beliefs held by some early Christian groups that the institutional church later condemned. The document suggested that the doctrine of Jesus' divinity was developed gradually over several centuries and became official church teaching for political rather than spiritual reasons. The text describes significant diversity in early Christian communities that official church history had erased. According to the writer, multiple competing interpretations of Jesus' message existed from the beginning. Different groups emphasized different teachings and practiced Christianity in vastly different ways. Some focused on Jewish law and tradition. Others rejected Jewish practices entirely. Some believed in one God. Others incorporated multiple divine beings into their theology. The writer implied that no single correct version of Christianity existed in the earliest period. The document named specific early church leaders and described their roles in shaping Christian doctrine. The writer accused some prominent figures of deliberately altering teachings to consolidate their own authority and create uniformity across Christian communities. According to the text, certain leaders suppressed alternative interpretations and destroyed writings that contradicted their preferred theology. The account suggested that theological debates were often settled through political maneuvering and power struggles rather than spiritual discernment or divine guidance. Several passages dealt with events in Jesus' life that do not appear in canonical Gospels. The writer described teachings Jesus gave to a small inner circle of followers that were never shared publicly. These private teachings reportedly contained the core of Jesus' spiritual message, while his public teachings used parables and stories that concealed deeper meanings. The text claimed that after Jesus' death, those who understood the inner teachings were gradually marginalized by leaders who only knew the public teachings. The document also addressed the formation of Christian scripture. The writer explained that many texts about Jesus and his teachings circulated in early communities. According to this account, church leaders in later centuries chose which texts to include in the Bible based on which ones supported their theological positions and political authority. Texts that presented alternative views were labeled heretical and systematically destroyed. The writer seemed aware that the document itself would likely be suppressed or destroyed, which explained why it had been hidden. One particularly controversial section discussed salvation and who could achieve it. The text described Jesus' teaching that salvation came through knowledge and understanding rather than faith or grace. According to the writer, Jesus believed all people had the capacity for spiritual enlightenment regardless of their beliefs about him personally. This stood in direct opposition to Christian doctrine that salvation comes only through belief in Jesus as divine Savior and Son of God. The Vatican Committee now faced a critical question. If this document was authentic, it meant the institutional church had knowingly suppressed alternative versions of Christianity and hidden evidence that contradicted official teachings. The contents of the sealed drawer suggested that what became Orthodox Christianity was not inevitable or divinely ordained, but rather the result of human choices, political conflicts, and historical accidents. Conspiracy or truth? News of the discovery began leaking despite Vatican security measures. By the fourth month of the committee's work, rumors circulated through academic and religious communities worldwide. Someone within the Vatican had shared information with outside colleagues. Within weeks, major newspapers were reporting that the Church had found an ancient document that contradicted core Christian beliefs. The Vatican refused to comment publicly, which only fueled more speculation and suspicion. The academic community split immediately into opposing camps. Some scholars argued the document represented genuine historical testimony that church authorities had deliberately hidden for centuries. They pointed to the Vatican's long-documented history of suppressing inconvenient evidence. The Church had hidden the trial records of Galileo for centuries. Vatican archives contained thousands of documents that remained classified despite being hundreds of years old. Critics argued this pattern proved the institution prioritized protecting its power over revealing historical truth. Other scholars urged caution about accepting the document as authentic. They noted that throughout history, people had created forgeries to legitimize alternative religious views. Early Christian heretical groups had produced numerous fake gospels and letters to support their theological positions. A sophisticated forger in the 1st or 2nd century could have created this document to undermine emerging Orthodox Christianity. The fact that it survived suggested someone valued it enough to preserve it, but that did not prove its contents were true. A third group of scholars took a middle position. They acknowledged the document might be historically authentic, while questioning whether it should override 2,000 years of Christian tradition. One ancient text written by a single person represented only one viewpoint among many in early Christianity. Even if genuine, the document showed what one individual believed, not necessarily what Jesus actually taught. These scholars argued that Christian tradition developed through centuries of collective wisdom and spiritual discernment, making it more reliable than any single ancient source. Forensic analysis of the document continued as experts searched for any evidence of forgery. Specialists examined the parchment under electron microscopes, looking for modern fibers or synthetic materials. They found none. Chemical analysis of the ink revealed only components available in the ancient world. Radiocarbon dating was repeated by 2 additional independent laboratories with the same results. The physical document consistently dated to the 1st century AD. Handwriting experts compared the script to every available example of 1st century Aramaic writing. The letter forms matched authenticated documents perfectly. The scribal techniques showed characteristics specific to 1st century Jewish education. Even the mistakes and corrections in the text appeared authentic, showing natural writing patterns rather than careful forgery. One expert noted that creating such a convincing fake would require knowledge of 1st century paleography that did not exist until modern archaeological discoveries. Meanwhile, leaked photographs of portions of the text appeared online. These images triggered intense debate across social media, religious websites, and academic forums. Believers and skeptics analyzed every visible word. Amateur translators offered their own interpretations. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some claimed the Vatican had possessed the document for centuries and was only now being forced to acknowledge it. Others insisted the entire discovery was staged to undermine Christianity. The Pope convened an emergency meeting of cardinals and senior church officials to determine how to respond. The gathering took place behind closed doors at the papal summer residence outside Rome. Participants were forbidden from bringing phones or recording devices. Swiss guards sealed the compound. For 3 days, church leaders debated the implications of the discovery and possible responses. Inside the meeting, divisions emerged immediately. Some officials argued for complete transparency, They believed the Church's credibility depended on honest engagement with historical evidence, even when that evidence proved uncomfortable. Hiding the document would confirm suspicions that the Church regularly suppressed truth to protect institutional interests. In an age of information technology and declining religious authority, secrecy would do more damage than revelation. Conservative voices countered that releasing the document would create a global crisis of faith. Millions of Christians would question beliefs they had held their entire lives. Some might abandon Christianity entirely, others might splinter into new denominations based on interpretations of the text. The resulting chaos could destroy the institutional church and leave believers spiritually adrift without guidance or community. A compromise position suggested limited disclosure with extensive theological context. The Vatican could acknowledge the document's existence and age while explaining why it did not invalidate core Christian beliefs. Experts could point out that one ancient text should not override the collective wisdom of church tradition. This approach might satisfy demands for transparency while minimizing disruption to faith. Historians outside the Vatican pointed out uncomfortable facts. The institutional church had spent centuries eliminating evidence of early Christian diversity. The canon of Scripture was not finalized until the 4th century, and that decision was made by church councils influenced by political considerations. Entire branches of early Christianity had been labeled heretical and destroyed simply because they disagreed with the faction that gained imperial support. The sealed drawer document fit a pattern of suppression that scholars had documented for decades. The church divided. The emergency meeting at the papal summer residence lasted 6 days instead of the planned 3. Cardinals and senior church officials could not reach agreement on how to handle the document. The divisions reflected deeper conflicts about the Church's role in modern society and its relationship with historical truth. Each day brought more heated arguments as the stakes became clearer to everyone involved. Progressive voices within the Church pushed for complete transparency. Cardinal Andreas Müller from Germany argued that the Church had lost credibility with younger generations by appearing closed and secretive. He pointed to declining church attendance across Europe and North America. Müller insisted that releasing the document with full scholarly analysis would demonstrate the Church's commitment to truth over self-protection. Other progressive officials agreed. They argued that faith strong enough to matter must be faith willing to confront challenges. Christianity had survived 2,000 years of questioning, debate, and historical discovery. They pointed out that Protestant denominations had been studying and debating biblical texts critically for over a century without collapsing. The Catholic Church needed to show similar intellectual courage and confidence in its spiritual foundations. Conservative cardinals responded with warnings about the dangers of naive optimism. Cardinal Roberto Santini from Italy reminded the assembly that most believers were not theologians or historians. They practiced simple faith based on doctrines taught since childhood. Confronting ordinary Christians with evidence that those doctrines might be historically questionable would not strengthen faith. It would create confusion, doubt, and spiritual crisis for millions of people who depended on the Church for guidance and certainty. Conservative officials cited research showing that religious doubt often led to depression, anxiety, and loss of community. Churches provided social support, moral frameworks, and meaning for billions of people worldwide. Destroying that support system by releasing a controversial ancient text would cause real psychological and social harm. The Church had a pastoral responsibility to protect believers from information they were not equipped to process properly. Some officials proposed middle ground solutions. The Vatican could acknowledge the document while emphasizing its limitations as a historical source. Scholars could publish academic papers about the text, while church leaders provided theological context explaining why it did not invalidate Christian beliefs. This approach would satisfy demands for openness while giving believers tools to maintain their faith despite the challenging information. Others suggested releasing only portions of the document. The Vatican could share sections that aligned with accepted Christian teaching while keeping controversial passages classified. This selective disclosure would demonstrate transparency without creating maximum disruption. However, critics within the meeting pointed out that partial release would guarantee accusations of cover-up. In the digital age, someone would eventually leak the rest. making the Church look dishonest and manipulative. The debate extended beyond Vatican walls as word of the internal divisions spread. Protestant leaders watched the Catholic response carefully, knowing it would affect all Christian denominations. If the document truly contradicted fundamental beliefs shared across Christianity, Protestant churches would face the same crisis. Some Protestant theologians publicly called for the Vatican to release the full text immediately, arguing that all Christians deserved access to early church documents regardless of their contents. Academic institutions worldwide demanded that the Vatican allow independent scholars to examine the document. Major universities sent formal requests for access. Archaeological and historical societies issued statements insisting that ancient texts belong to human heritage, not to religious institutions with vested interests in controlling information. The Vatican's refusal to grant outside access reinforced suspicions that church officials were hiding something damaging. Religious skeptics and atheist organizations seized on the controversy as evidence that Christianity had always been built on selective history and theological manipulation. They argued that the sealed drawer document proved church leaders had knowingly suppressed alternative versions of Christian origins. Online forums filled with discussions about how institutional religion controlled information to maintain power. The longer the Vatican delayed a decision, the more ammunition critics had for attacking Christian credibility. Meanwhile, ordinary believers around the world reacted to the rumors and leaked information in different ways. Some expressed anger at the Vatican for keeping secrets. Others defended the Church's right to study the document thoroughly before making statements. Many felt confused and anxious about what the discovery might mean for their faith. Parish priests reported increased questions during confession and counseling sessions as Catholics struggled with uncertainty about foundational beliefs. The Pope met privately with his closest advisors after the emergency meeting ended without resolution. He faced an impossible choice. Every option carried serious risks. Releasing the document would create immediate crisis, but might preserve long-term credibility. Suppressing it would maintain short-term stability, but guarantee future accusations of dishonesty. Partial disclosure satisfied no one and pleased no one. The contents of one ancient parchment now threatened to tear apart the world's largest religious institution from within. Revelation or revolution? After 8 months of debate, examination, and prayer, the Vatican announced its decision. On a cold December morning, the Pope addressed a packed audience at the Vatican press office. Camera crews from news organizations worldwide recorded every word. The announcement would reach billions of people within hours. The Pope confirmed that archivists had discovered an ancient document sealed in a hidden drawer within the Vatican Archives. He acknowledged that carbon dating and forensic analysis placed the parchment in the 1st century AD, making it one of the oldest Christian texts ever found. The document was authentic in age and materials. It represented a genuine artifact from the period when Christianity was forming. However, the full contents would not be immediately released. The Pope announced the creation of a special commission that would study the document for 2 more years. This commission would include Vatican scholars, independent historians, biblical experts, and theologians from multiple Christian denominations. Their task was to analyze the text's historical context, theological implications, and relationship to other early Christian writings. Only after this comprehensive study would the Vatican publish the complete document with scholarly commentary. The announcement satisfied no one completely. The Vatican released carefully selected passages from the document as a gesture toward transparency. These excerpts showed the text's age and significance without including the most controversial theological content. The released portions sparked immediate global discussion about Christian origins, early church conflicts, and the development of Orthodox doctrine. Academic responses divided sharply. Some scholars praised the Vatican for taking time to study the document properly rather than rushing to release material that required expert context. Others accused the Church of another cover-up, hiding the most damaging passages while pretending to be open. Demands for full immediate release continued from universities and research institutions worldwide. Several scholars announced plans to file legal challenges demanding access to the document under cultural heritage laws. For ordinary believers, the announcement created mixed reactions. Some Christians felt their faith strengthened by evidence of Christianity's deep historical roots. The existence of first-century documents proved the movement's ancient origins and enduring significance. These believers trusted church leadership to handle the document responsibly and provide proper guidance about its meaning. Other Christians experienced profound spiritual crisis. The acknowledgement that an ancient text contradicted some church teachings raised disturbing questions. If church leaders had hidden this document, what else had they concealed? The discovery prompted renewed academic interest in other suppressed early Christian texts. Universities expanded research programs studying the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi Library, and other non-canonical writings. Scholars began re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about how Christianity developed in its first centuries. The sealed drawer document proved that official church history represented only the winner's version of complex theological debates that early Christians fought intensely. Religious skeptics pointed to the controversy as confirmation that institutional Christianity had always controlled information to maintain power. The Vatican's refusal to release the full document immediately seemed to prove that church officials still prioritized institutional protection over truth. Online discussions about the discovery reached millions of people who had never thought seriously about Christian origins before. Whatever the document's ultimate significance, its emergence from a forgotten Vatican drawer demonstrated that history's most important secrets sometimes hide in plain sight. The discovery forced humanity to reconsider foundational beliefs about faith, truth, and institutional authority. One sealed drawer had opened questions that would take generations to fully explore and understand. The revolution in Christian historical understanding had only just begun. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.